Welcome back to Family Twist. I'm Corey. In this surprise-filled episode, we're diving into filmmaker Luke Davies' compelling journey of self-discovery, ignited by the results of a home DNA test. Raised in Rochdale, England, Luke grew up believing he was white British, only to have a DNA test in his 20s reveal a rich tapestry of ancestral backgrounds, including West African, Portuguese, and more. This unexpected revelation leads Luke on a quest to find his biological father, a journey documented in the BBC documentary, A Stranger in My Family. One thing that's really striking about Luke's story is his resilience and openness throughout this entire process, and it's a long one. From confronting painful family secrets to embracing his newfound heritage and family, it's a testament to the strength of the human spirit. It's also inspiring to see how Luke's passion for storytelling became a means to navigate and document his path to self-discovery. Let's meet Luke and hear about several twists about to come his way. Luke, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get started talking about your story, I do have to mention that Kendall is absolutely obsessed with Manchester.
I am, and not because I've been there, but I am officially, at least for America, the biggest Coronation Street fan. And I know to a lot of people where you live, you know, people have told me like, oh, that's kind of cheesy. What are you 90 years old? I don't care. I love it. I went back and watched whatever was on YouTube from 1960, you know.
Yeah. And I live not too far from the studios, actually. So if you ever come to visit, then
there you go.
We can go there. That's fine.
I think the reason he first asked me out was because my name is Corey.
True. Spelled differently, of course.
Right, but still, had I known. Yeah, I resisted for years getting involved and getting caught up in it because I'm not a soap opera person. But, you know, after having it play in the house for years and years now, of course, I know the characters and all the, you know, the storylines. So before we talk about your career in filmmaking, can you take us back a little bit and share your family discovery?
Yeah, of course. So back in 2019, I received the results from a DNA kit, which told me, to my surprise, that I was mixed race. So my kind of ancestral makeup is white British, Portuguese, and West African. And up until that point, I was 27 years old. I had been raised to believe that I was white British. My parents are white, you know, my whole family is. So it came as quite a shock. Took a few days to think about what to do next because there was no blueprint really of what to do. I spoke to my mum about it and she told me that my dad who raised me, my parents are still together. My dad who raised me is not my biological father, and that my biological father was a man she'd met on a girls' trip to Portugal a couple of weeks around the time of dating my dad who raised me.
Oh.
So it was kind of like a holiday romance. She'd come home and then, I think there was a lot of different factors at play, but essentially went forward not really challenging the idea that I was anything other than my dad's. So, not anticipating at that time there would be postal DNA kits.
Right.
Like 30, almost 30 years later. So, it was quite a shock. My dad who raised me didn't know. He did have, I guess, feelings because of the way I looked. Like when I was younger, I had like a big afro. And, you know, my skin, as soon as I'm in the sun, it's like my skin like changes from dark to light, depending on the season. So there was like times, it was weird. It's a strange one to look back at because everybody was complicit in a way by not asking questions. And nobody ever wanted to be the person to say, well, you know, what's going on? Why does he tan so much? Or why is his hair like that? Or whatever. So, it was a lot to get through, but that was kind of the catalyst of the then 4-year adventure that followed.
Did you have siblings?
I do. So my mum has a son and my dad has a son and a daughter from different relationships before they got together. It was a weird one. It was like I have siblings, but they grew up, aside from my mum's son, they grew up separately from me. So it was kind of like we were quite a nuclear family in a sense. So that was a strange one as well because I was like, I'm your only child, but I do also have siblings. So it's been a strange dynamic.
Yeah.
Did your mother have thoughts over the years that possibly you might not be your dad's?
Yeah, I think that she says that when I was born, she knew. She never actually knew for a fact until I took the test because it wasn't something she was going to do herself. But she said she could just tell by the way I looked, really. Then, yeah, I think over time, so my mum is my dad's carer. And so that took a precedent of like a lot of our life as a family, especially after I was born. He was really ill for a long time. So, there wasn't enough time or space to kind of entertain anything else. And so I think that also like fed into how it never became a topic. But my mum said that when I got older, there were times that she thought, oh, because of my dad's health issues and because there was potential opportunities where I might need to donate an organ to him or like all various health related things, that something was going to come out, like they were going to ask, assuming, that I'm his biological son. And she was always worried about that. And then the more time went on and nothing happened and he got better, she was like, okay, well, I guess it's never going to be mentioned.
Well, how did you break the news to them?
My mum came over I wasn't living with them. At the time, I was living just outside Manchester. They were in a town outside Manchester. So I'd invited my mum over on her own. Because I don't know what my logical reasoning was. I think it was just because you kind of go to your mum, maybe, like first. So it wasn't that invited, I think. Yeah, you've got a secret. Because I was kind of just flabbergasted by it all. So I invited my mum over and then I was kind of being really weird about it. Like, because at first she came over, didn't know what I was going to talk to her about. So we're talking about life for like an hour, and we talk about work, we talk about everything. And then after a while, it was like a lull in the conversation. And I was just like, oh, I wanted to talk to you about it, about something. And then I said, I did have an ulterior motive, to bring you over. And then I was kind of laughing because I just felt awkward. And I said, oh, I did this DNA kit and it came back saying this. And like, look at my laptop, like, look at the map with the results. And my mum just wasn't looking at me. I was sharing a couch and she just wasn't looking at me and I could just tell. And I was just talking, you're just filling the silence.
Yeah.
And she wasn't looking. And then there was just a silence. And I said, you can tell me what it is, whatever it is. And then she just said, your dad's not your biological father. So it was really surreal because I didn't really expect anything. Like, I didn't think that far ahead. So I was processing that, and then we both cried a lot. And then, I kind of went into this weird militant state. I was like, right, this will be fine. We'll sort this out. This is what we're going to do. Because I just felt like she was so, like, bereft from it all. So she left, and then it was probably about 3 weeks afterwards that I went over and I said, I'm going to come and stay and then we'll have dinner and then we'll tell Dad then. And I went over and my mum was just too upset. Like, my dad had gone upstairs to go on like our family computer. She was just in tears. And I was like, I'll just do it by myself then. So it was the same situation really, because I went up and I was like, I need to talk to you about something. And then I was like giving the longest story and I was like, so I did this test, and like when you do these tests, basically what they do is like going through all the minute details. Yeah. And then I was partway through the story, and he must have put two and two together, and he just said, "So you're not mine then?" And I was like, "Well, I don't want to phrase it that way because I am. He is my dad. Like, he's been there since I was born." And so, yeah, that upset me that he said that because I was like, I didn't feel like that was the correct phrasing. But I think he was just taken aback. And it caused a bit of an argument with me and my mum because I felt like we'd fallen into this dynamic where I was like, even though I was an adult and I'm an adult, I was like, I'm the child in this dynamic, and why am I feeling like I have to step up to initiate these conversations? And I don't know how to do any of this, and it's not even my fault, not to play the blame game, but I've been put in this situation. So it was really tricky at first. The only way I could see us going forward and it not damaging our relationship was to just confront it all the time. And so that's kind of what we ended up doing, especially when I decided to make a film out of it.
Yeah.
Sure, right.
There's that.
Then you can't get away from it.
No. Now, did you have any matches from your biological father's side come up through the test?
No. So the only significant match that I had was, at the time, it said a first cousin once removed, based in Portugal. So that was it. Everything. Everyone else that I matched with was like third cousin, fourth cousin, and I'm completely new to genealogy or anything to do with this. So it was all completely foreign to me. I've never done it as a hobby. I don't know much about it. So I just had the one match, which was a first cousin once removed, based in Portugal, called Renato. And so when I was going forward with everything, I thought, I guess this is where to start. But yeah, it was to try and find my birth father. It felt insurmountable when I entertained the idea of doing it, to be honest. It took a while to gain traction as well.
But at that point in time, had your mother told you about the connection to Portugal?
So she had said all she could remember was that she knew his name was Carlos. My birth father's name was Carlos, and that he worked in a bar. He was a bartender. That's where they met. And that they met, she went on holiday to a place called Albufeira, which is in the Algarve in Portugal. So those were the three details that I had, because almost 3 decades had gone by. So she just never, and also was trying to probably repress many of the thoughts because of the situation. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit needle in a haystack feeling.
How did this discovery inform your filmmaking, your passion for filmmaking?
Good question. So when all of this was going on, I was working in TV, and I'd studied media. I'd just come out of my master's, working in TV and development. Yeah, a big passion of mine has always been marginalized voices, people who feel othered. I'm a gay man. I'm from a working class background, so I was always kind of interested in the stories of the underdog, so to speak. And so I remember it wasn't for about a year, because I ended up leaving work. So I left the job I had in TV because my mental health was just really bad. I think I was just really overwhelmed because I was trying to work a TV job, which is so demanding. And then I was trying to navigate this whole conversation of having no idea of what I even wanted or where to start. So it wasn't for a year until I started entertaining the thought of like filmmaking being involved. And I remember having a conversation with who became one of the directors, and I just said, I think I need to film this and document this process, because there's no other foundation, there's no other structure. I'm like completely out in the open by myself. And as much as I can read stories from other people or watch shows, like we have a show in the UK, I don't know if it's in the US as well, called Long Lost Family. So I can watch those shows, and like they're really touching. It's really like empowering. I love those things, but at the same time, I felt really at a loss to how to get to those points. It just was like I literally have like a name. I knew he was in a bar almost 30 years ago, and so I was like, I think I need to. I know I trust filmmaking. I trust it to support me. I trust it to be an ecosystem within which I can like build a team and take it forward. So I think I saw it more in a logistical sense at first, and then once we got the team together and I trusted them and they cared as much about what I was trying to do as me, then you're able to be a bit more vulnerable. So in turn, it was like this pursuit of trying to, well, you're going on an adventure and you think you're going from A to B, and you think, oh, I'm going to find somebody, that's the point. And it's like everything that happens in between is just as crucial because you have months of nothing happening, and you're trying to pitch the film to people, and they say, what if you don't find him? Is it even going to be entertaining? So you're trying to like justify your life being entertaining, whilst at the same time there's no promise of anything. So I grew a lot in that process as a filmmaker and as a producer. And then the more comfortable I felt in that role, the more I could kind of let that go and just be open to what happened, because it was absolutely a roller coaster. The whole thing was like 3.5 years of filming on and off. So I'm sure I know many people have stories way longer than that, or maybe never have outcomes or whatever, but it just was really full on. So it wasn't until it was over that I was like, did that just happen? So I think it just taught me to be vulnerable and taught me to trust that I do know what an interesting story is, even when it's in my own life. And so I think it made me feel more confident in that respect.
Good. What were the more satisfying moments?
The first was we'd filmed on and off for 2.5 years. And when I say we, there was Tamar Mankisarian, who's one of the directors, who I met by chance and really just took a chance with me. I remember pitching it to her and saying, I don't know if it'll ever be anything. I don't know if I'll ever finish it or if we'll find anyone. It might just go on YouTube or whatever. And so she stuck by me regardless of what the outcome was going to be. And then there was 2 exec producers, Nick and Jelaine, who really just supported us like from day one. So we ended up, the way it kind of came to fruition properly was that we'd filmed on and off for 2 years. We made a teaser of what we wanted to make, and then we submitted it to take part in this pitch at a film festival called Sheffield Dogfest here in the UK. So that was in it got picked as one of the 5 projects to pitch. I had to go basically stand on stage and pitch my life to a room of people. In a
That's
way
not
that's
awkward
like
at all.
entertaining.
Yeah,
I had a complete out-of-body experience. I barely remember any of it. Yeah, and just pitch it, and we had to play this teaser, and it's like my mum's crying in it, I'm crying in it. It was really intense, but then we won the pitch, so that was a really satisfying moment because it just felt as though, as much as you can always believe in yourself, and I did, regardless of whether we were not or not, to be kind of validated in that way as a filmmaker and say, oh, you really have something here. It's like a huge thing, it just feels so monumental. So that was really special. And then I suppose the main thing is having an outcome and finding the connection. Like I went looking for my birth father. Spoiler alert to anyone listening, I did find him. Yeah, so just that whole process. I mean, my team we'd been to Portugal. I won't tell the whole story, but we'd been to Portugal to look for the bar where he worked because we felt like that was going to give us a lead because maybe we could find the owner or something. And so the genealogist, Angela, who came with us, it was just brilliant and essentially called everybody in fields in Portugal while we were there and trying to find this owner. And she found the owner from the 90s, which is just miraculous. And he knew someone who knew someone. And so they all this was going on behind the scenes, and then they came to me. We came back from Portugal, and they came to me, Angela and Laura, our other genealogist, and just said, we called around and we found this man called Carlos, and he was born in West Africa, and he worked in Albufeira, and he lives in London now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like, okay, we've just been running around Portugal for no reason.
I'm sure it was beautiful.
It was, yeah. It was worthwhile, and it was beautiful. Yeah, it was very nice.
There are those places.
To do 3.5 years of the adventure, so to speak, and then everything happened within 9 weeks. Like we went to Portugal, came back, they found the owner, they found Carlos. I went to meet him within 9 weeks.
Wow,
it was madness, and there was just so many layers to it. So we found Carlos. I'd already gone to meet Renato before this, who's the cousin I matched with, who was actually my half cousin. So we share a grandfather, despite it saying first cousin once removed. And so connected with him and my auntie, so that's Carlos's sister, who, now she's like, I have this new brother. And so I met them before we found Carlos. And then it was kind of a weird bittersweet thing because what I discovered was that my grandfather had passed away. So Carlos's father passed away in January 2022. One of the kind of piece of criteria we had when we were looking for Carlos was that we were convinced that Carlos wouldn't know his birth father as well. So that was a theory we'd had. And we were like, we're going to have to kind of ask whoever we find if they know their birth father and suss out. And so when Angela, the genealogist, called Carlos for the first time to say, I'm working on behalf of Luke, he's looking for a sperm, well, trying not to scare him to death. She was going through it and she said he was just saying, listening to the story. And then she said, and one of the other things is that the Carlos we're looking for, we believe he didn't know his birth father. And then Carlos said, I've been looking for my birth father my whole life. Angela was like, I almost dropped the phone. And so it was a bittersweet moment because when we did another DNA test, make sure the relationship was legit, it was like this confirmation that like his birth father had already passed away before he'd got the chance to meet him. So, as like sad as that is, it gave him a lot of closure because he just never knew anything about it. Didn't even know his name, didn't know anything about his birth father at all. Once we'd met, Carlos and I, we ended up going back to Portugal and filming him going to like the cemetery, like paying his respects there, which was really intense. He was like grateful for that because it was just always a question. And so it was weird to have this one story where I kind of had this outcome because I found what I was looking for, and then someone didn't. It's like you can see how it can just turn out anyway, really. And so, yeah, I would say, sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but yeah, I think winning the pitch and then finding Carlos like were the most satisfying moments. But there was a lot of good stuff in between because you're just like piecing together an identity in real time, you know. And I think there's something really like powerful about that.
And the film is up for a BAFTA this year, correct?
So it's been long-listed for a BAFTA, yes. So I find out if it's nominated in 3 weeks.
Ooh,
so we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. Fingers crossed. I mean, it was nominated for a Broadcast Award, which was really cool. It didn't win, but I mean, I had a fabulous time at the ceremony, so I'm happy about that.
Yes.
Yeah, and anything that comes afterwards is just a plus, isn't it? Because, you know, Carlos came to the award ceremony and we were walking down the stairs and I said, it's so strange because a year ago we didn't even know each other, you know, and then we're walking into this place to like potentially win an award. It's like a really surreal experience.
Wow. I want to go back to something that you mentioned before about your passion for filmmaking and telling people who's, you know, marginalized stories and people who, you know, don't have a big voice out there. Have you thought about that maybe in your subconscious you always had some of a sense that you didn't know where you belonged, and maybe that was what was driving this passion for telling these types of stories?
Yeah, I think so. I think but in hindsight, probably, because one of the things I realized occupied a lot of my headspace during my 20s was that I remember saying to my mum when I was about 18, I was like, I really don't think I'm supposed to be in this town. And you know how you kind of attribute that to just being like 18 and you're like, I'm over this town, I never want to be in it again. You want to move away. You know, everyone has that feeling. Yeah. So I was like, it's probably that. And so I spent a lot of time in my early 20s just like any moment that I was not studying, I was away. I was somewhere else or I moved away. I'd have feelings like that when I would be with my family. Like, I'm really close to my family. Like, they're so supportive of me. When I came out as gay, like, no issues whatsoever. They've always supported me through everything, even though when I don't know what's going on with my career, they're like, go for it. And so it was a really weird feeling because I'd sit around at Christmas or whenever we get together for dinners and stuff, celebrate. And there'd be these weird lucid moments of me feeling like I'm not meant to be like in this room. I couldn't like pin what it was. It was just like an other feeling. And so I think that then transferred over when I stopped kind of traveling a lot and wanted to just put roots down a little bit and commit to my career. Those kind of stories, I think it's like the intersection of things as well, like the intersection of, for example, for me, it's like being working class and being gay, like that intersection is, you know, quite deep and layered. And I was really interested by, like, whenever I watch other people's stories, it's like I want to watch something that's nothing to do with my life, usually. Especially having made a film about it. You know, it's like people will say to me, have you watched Long West Family? I'm like, why would I watch that? Because I'm living it. And so it's like, you know, I just want to watch things that like really are an education and entertainment wrapped in one. And I just think that there's so many stories, especially from marginalized communities, that don't ever get told. And I think there's a big thing about that where it's like the commercial appeal and money, it's all about money. And so I think it's what I want to use my skill set for, and my passion for telling stories is to find that middle ground to be a representative of projects that might seem like they won't make much money and go, they can though, because there's people who want to watch them and want to hear them. And, you know, like this podcast, it's like, you know, people want to hear different life experiences and, you know, be enriched by that and learn from that. And so I always thought that being othered was a negative, and that's not to say, I mean, like being bullied and things like that are horrible, but just like that feeling of being other, I always thought of that as a negative, whereas now I feel like it's such a power for me because it makes me see, like, I feel like it's like heightened my capacity for empathy. it like opens up my intrigue to so many different things that have nothing to do with my life, and don't benefit me just by making those films or supporting those filmmakers. And especially going on this kind of adventure that I did through the documentary, it's just introduced me to so many different people and made me feel so humbled by the fact that, yes, I grew up with not a lot. My family grew up quite poor. And, that's kind of never going to go away where I had those formative years. But at the same time, it's like that doesn't have to be everything. It's like I had a warm home. I had two parents who loved me, they're still together, like that solid family unit. So it's like less focusing on what's not there and thinking of whether it's my story or other people's, what it can afford other people if they're just given a chance to talk about it.
Absolutely. So what are you working on now?
Good question. What am I working on? So I'm trying to, it's funny because I was just doing some treatments for projects before this call. I've just worked on a short film called Before I Do, which, because I work in both documentary and kind of narrative, like fictional stories. So that was funded by the British Film Institute. So it's about a British Indian woman called Mona who wakes up on the morning of her wedding to another woman, and she is unsure whether she's going to go through with it or not. And it talks about monogamy and culture and the expectation of, I guess, a queer person within those like environments. I've just wrapped on that. I think what's next really is wanting to explore the West African part of my ancestry. And so I've been thinking of doing something that's probably a bit more abstract, not as BBC, because the documentary was made for BBC, and that was a whole machine of an experience. So it's probably something a bit more DIY. But I'd love to just explore the story of my grandmother, who was part of a tribe in West Africa in Guinea-Bissau. Yeah, and like explore my grandfather's life. He was he was in the Portuguese Navy. So it's like, just explore their stories and also work in feature films as well and start making longer form projects. Because I've made 5 short films now, and as much as I love them, they are hard to make. There's not a lot of money in those. So yeah, right. I think just keep growing my business. My company's called Polari. Keep growing that, growing my projects. Like you were saying, it's the documentaries become a catalyst for me realizing that I can use filmmaking as a tool to like, not always about myself, but, to explore things I'm interested in. And it doesn't always have to be for an audience. Sometimes it can, sometimes it can't.
Right. But that's the thing. This documentary is not just about you. It's not just for you. It's another voice out there, letting people know like that they should explore their stories and find their truths and maybe better understand, why there was a family secret or something along those lines. So it's important that you're putting that out there. It's very brave, and it's what's needed. The voices need to get louder.
Yeah. One thing that's always stuck with me from the entire experience of looking for Carlos and making the film and everything was that when I went to Portugal, we were driving back, the team and I, from meeting my cousin and my auntie, and Angela, the genealogist, was with us. And Angela's also a historian, Portuguese historian. And so everywhere I went on the trip, she's telling me like so much information and just so many things like about culture and everything. And so we were driving back one night after meeting my cousin and my auntie, and she's telling me all these stories. And I was a bit like, as grateful as I was for the whole experience, I was like, this is really intense. My brain can't hold it more information.
Yeah.
And there was like and I'm just going, I'm like, yeah, it's really cool. And then there was kind of a pause where she was looking out the window. And she went, isn't it just so exciting? Like, all of this belongs to you. And it just was like the way she said that has always stuck with me, because it just was like, yes, she was talking specifically then about Portuguese culture and heritage and all of these stories, but it just made me realize like everything, like if you think about everything like that, how exciting it is, because we so easily fall into like, like another day of filming, another day of whatever. Whereas when you think of it, it's like all of that belongs to me. Like I have a right to it. I can claim that. Like that's freedom. The more you know about where you come from, or the more you align yourself with what your passions are. And it just really changed my perspective, because I realized how easy can be to be in an extraordinary situation and feel like it's ordinary. Yeah, it's just something I'll always take forward, whether it's like through the perspective of uplifting someone else in their story or myself. It's just like it belongs to you and it's your responsibility to kind of like take it, really, because that's only going to benefit you in like your life and your purpose.
Yep, for sure. The complex emotions that come with not, I was completely delusional about how wonderful it would be to find my biological family. I think I'm an optimist in general, so I had this sort of, fairy tale built about, how closely connected I was going to be with my 6 half siblings, and it hasn't all been rainbows and, and flowers, but that's okay. It's been still really wonderful for Corey and me. We moved 2,700 miles across the country to be near, some of my biological father's family. And it's still been great. I love like your happy, ending of the story, getting to meet your biological father. And that's just wonderful.
Yeah, I completely understand though what you mean, because when I was looking for Carlos, I was really in like self-preservation mode. I was like seeing it very factually, very like logistically, and I was like, I'm just finding a person who, if they're alive, has information that is about my life. Like that's kind of how I was seeing it. And then there was this other bubble that was like, it could also be that I have a relationship with this person. Like I would have really separated them because I just thought there's so many factors and we are literally strangers. So I was like, I can't pin my hopes on the fact that it's going to work out. And, he's a lovely person. Like we are quite close now. But yeah, it's been really interesting, like after meeting, because these are, I have 2 brothers as well who are Carlos's sons who I found like through the journey as well. And I love them to death now. But it's like the camera stopped rolling and then you're 4 adult people who have lives, memories, like they have memories together that I'm not a part of. And like there was this weird feeling like it was just such a like conflicting situation to go to London to meet them and then come home, because you're like, I can't leave. Like I've just spent all this time, and like you feel like you're making up for like almost 30 years at that point. Yeah, it was such a weird feeling. And then I'd go to visit, and I just think like, how do I fit into this dynamic, and what do I say? How much do I push, and how much do I not? And the things I've learned about them is like they don't really text. So I'd text them, they wouldn't reply, and I'd be like, they don't want to talk to me. And so it is really strange because you just like have this like A to B, oh, I've done it, and then it's like the lights go off and the circus leaves town, and you're a bit like, so what do I do now? Like, how do I? Next? And I think that's really humbling, like, because it is a really strange feeling. And people go like, do you still see him? Like, yeah, we didn't just film with that. Bye. Thanks for everything. Yes. I'm like, yeah, I do see him. I am nurturing this relationship now. But it's a weird one, and I think it's quite important to talk about that and the reality of it, especially once everything finishes.
Yeah,
there is no blueprint for this, and everyone's journey is going to be different. We could share best practices. Here's mistakes we've made along the way, and try to learn from this. But the mistakes we made might be not mistakes for somebody else. There's no like A to B path.
Yeah. And I find it, because people will say, it's kind of a brave thing to do. And I think anybody in these situations, that we've kind of had, there is an element of bravery to it. But I just think that also there's an element sometimes that you don't realize until you're talking to someone else or you're reflecting on it, where you're like, I just didn't really have a choice. I kind of just went with it. And it's like I was talking to someone who got in touch with me after the film came out, and they were saying to me, it was like quite an emotional conversation, and they were in a similar situation to me, and they were really, really apprehensive to like do anything at all. Like they kind of like had this information, they'd not even told their mom, they'd not even like started any of it, and it had been like a couple of years. And they were just like really on the fence. And I found myself thinking about it afterwards, thinking like, people are so different. Like, people are really different. And I think I was naive to that because you just think from your own perspective. And I was like, there just wasn't a world in which I could have left it alone. Like, it just would have probably tortured me. And yeah, and that's not to say that like going to look for someone is like the better option, but it's just to say that like some people feel more comfortable, are comfortable with the not knowing, because it's kind of like, why disrupt my life? Why disrupt another person's life? And so I can see that, but it really was like, wow, people are so different in how they approach things. And I've had people say to me like, oh, I don't know if I could do it. Because obviously it prompted everybody around me within like a 2-mile radius to like buy a DNA test, because they were like, I want to see what my thing is. It's a strange experience. And all my friends started doing them. And they come back and it's like, oh, it's just white British European. They were like disappointed almost. And I went, but what would you do that if you're in the same situation? It's a weird one to think about your own life outside of your own body. Like, it's hard to do, but sometimes I have moments where I'm like, oh yeah, it was kind of crazy,
Right. And really fortunate that your half cousin took a test in Portugal, because it's not this global phenomenon.
Yeah,
there are parts of the world that it's just not a thing.
Yeah, he was a massive like genealogy buff. Like, he's really interested, not kind of as a hobby, but just specifically for like the family. So when we first connected, he was like throwing all of these names at me from like hundreds of years ago and all this stuff. And they're all like Portuguese names. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So yeah, it was quite an anomaly that he was interested in it. And there's so many serendipitous things. The reason I took the test in the first place, because it wasn't just prompted by my own intrigue. It was because when I was working at the TV production company, I was in a development meeting about a show, and essentially there was a storyline in it that was something to do with racial identity, and I was just a mere office assistant, so I sat in the corner like silent, a ghost, making notes, and everyone's discussing it, and then this executive just out of nowhere went, I'd love to know what you think, to me. Basically like assuming that I was mixed, which at the time in my mind I wasn't, and so which is a really weird thing to say. And so he's like, I'd love to know what you think, and I was like, I don't know. I just like didn't know what to say, and so I kind of diverted away from the question. And then when I came out of the meeting, my manager asked me to come to her office, and she said, why did you freaking like stumble over your words when he asked you? And I said, well, I think he was asking me because he thinks I'm mixed race. And she went, you're not. And I was like, no. The naivety. And, and then she was like, she closed her door, and then she went, I want to tell you this story. And basically told me a story that what ended up happening to me had happened to her. And she'd found out because she'd had surgery, and it came up during like this health thing. But she was like in her 50s, she had 2 kids, and like, it really fractured her family. And so she's telling me the story, and I'd had a lot of like theories and accusations and all sorts of people telling me all sorts of things. Like, my whole life, it's just kind of gone over my head. But it was like the first time that someone was saying something that I thought, if there was ever anything, this would happen to me. Because when you just feel like you're one of those people where everything happens. This I feel like I'm living in Coronation Street, and and so I was like, she had this gut feeling, and then. Yeah, and so she told me the story, and then a month later, I'd gone on the DNA Kit website, and I was like, I can't afford the test. And then I think I'd signed up to the emails, and I got an email saying near Christmas saying it was half price. And then and I was like, it's so expensive. And then I literally, like, that same day or the next day, I got a bonus from work, and it was the exact amount of the test. So I ended up buying the test. Wow. So it's like, that if I'd not been working there, or like not got that bonus, or there's so many strange things like that where it's so serendipitous. So I think you should have to like hear those callings.
Right. So what does your former manager think of your journey and your film?
She emailed. I'm not as much in touch with her now because it's been quite a while, but she did email me, and she said that she was like, I watched it and I cried, and it was a weird one because I ended up leaving that job because of everything that was going on. I didn't really wrap up a lot of conversations from the job, and there was not much closure. And so I think, yeah, she was a bit like, oh, I didn't realize how intense it all was. And that's probably on me. It's probably because I was like, yeah, everything's fine. I'm just going to have a sabbatical. It's like ran away. Yeah, you don't want to tell anyone that you're struggling. And you don't know what you're struggling with. And it's like really hard to articulate. So she just said that she was proud that I'd done it and was very surprised, I'm sure, because it was like 3.5 years later and there I am on TV.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Weird situation.
Amazing. Well, we will be putting out the good vibes into the universe for the BAFTA. And definitely we'll follow up and find, once we see, the nominations, we'll definitely follow up with you. But we'll send the positive vibes out there.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. Because, like I say, the circus does kind of pack up and go out of town after a while. So it's nice to have these conversations, be reminded of everything that happened and share it with other people. And if anyone is in similar situations, you have every right to know where you come from, whatever questions you have are valid. It's like, you just have to sometimes find the right people to ask them to. It's not everyone who's equipped with that. But yeah, thank you for everything you do with this podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Sharing your story as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, we appreciate you and putting your story out there for everybody to learn from and get inspiration from. So thank you for taking some time to talk with us, Luke.
Thank you. Thanks. It was lovely to meet you.
As we wrap today's episode, we hope Luke's story inspires you to explore your own histories, to ask the tough questions, and to embrace the twists and turns of your own family stories. And maybe most importantly, keep being open to whatever answers might come your way. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget, family secrets are the ultimate plot twist. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage LLC. We also feature original music from Cosmic Afterthoughts.